When Oregon ended state-run sports wagering in 2007, the decision wouldn't necessarily have registered with John Van Dyke. At the time, he coached basketball at a small Washington college. When a U.S. Supreme Court decision last week raised the prospect of its return here, he perked up. "This is a huge deal," he said. Van Dyke is the new athletic director at the Oregon Institute of Technology, one of 7 public universities in the state whose athletic departments receive a cut of Oregon lottery revenues. On his first day on the job in February, he learned how much his athletic department relies on that revenue. After salaries are removed, the $401,824 the Klamath Falls College received last year from the lottery covered 38% of the Hustlin' Owls operating budget. When the Supreme Court struck down a federal law banning state-run sports betting, it left it to individual states to decide whether to allow such wagers within their borders. The ruling has far-reaching implications for both professional leagues and college athletics organizations. And, potentially, for the athletics programs at Oregon's public universities. The first question Portland State AD Valerie clearly had. She wrote in an email, "How will the Supreme Court ruling impact our current state lottery funding? Athletic directors across the state are watching carefully for signs of what sports betting's potential return might bring, both good and bad. There is cautious hope that if sports betting returns and attracts a larger pool of players, it could translate into a fresh source of money to complement the lottery funds the universities already receive. Support the ADs say could fund more scholarships and offset expenses in the business with fragile budgets. But where many see promise, others also fear downsides, in the form of point shaving and gambling by athletes, coaches or staffers that could affect the integrity of competition. Money holds fragile budgets. Together the athletic departments at Oregon's public universities, Eastern, Western, Southern, OIT, Portland State, Oregon and Oregon State, vary between urban and rural, NCAA and NAIA, monstrous and modest. But all draw from a common funding source, the lottery. Starting in 1989, proceeds from Oregon's NFL parlay game Sports Action began to flow to athletic departments from Portland to Ashland and Monmouth to La Grande. When a federal ban on state-run sports betting took hold in 1992, the same ban struck down last week, it didn't impact Oregonians, whose lottery games were grandfathered in. Sports Action's payments, which were tied to the lottery's profits, were a boost but not a cash cow. Just $3.5 million was distributed during the 2005-07 biennium, $2 million less than a decade earlier. Legislators and schools wanted to capture tourism revenue that came with hosting big-time NCAA events, but the organization refused to hold its championships in states with sports betting. In 2005, a bill winding down Sports Action was passed, and the last parlays were bet in 2007. The state has since hosted numerous NCAA championships, including the popular men's and women's basketball tournaments that will return again in 2019, 2020 and 2022. Lottery payments continued. As part of the bill, universities were entitled to receive 1% of lottery revenues. That money is divided among the schools, according to the state, with considerations given to the athletic conference in which the universities belong and the cost of competing in them, as well as the level of effort being made by the public university to generate funds and support from private sources. Since 2013, the legislature capped Oregon and Oregon State to receiving just over $1 million per biennium. The other 5 schools split the rest, with Portland State receiving the biggest cut. Not every dollar goes to the athletic departments, 12% goes to scholarships distributed by the wider university, but the vast majority is directed to student athletes. Sports lottery payouts, 2015-17 biennium Portland State, $2,277,567 Western Oregon, $1,162,716 Oregon, $1,030,000 capped amount Oregon State, $1,030,000 capped amount Oregon Institute of Technology, $913,239 Southern Oregon, $913,239 total sports lottery payout per biennium ** full distribution of 1% allocation of Oregon Lottery revenues. Of the money directed to fund athletics programs, 70% must go toward non-revenue producing sports, according to the state. And at least 50% of the total amount is required to be made available for women's athletics. Lottery dollars are able to help with OIT keeping compliant with Title X, Van Dyke said, in a sentiment echoed by his peers. The $511,593 that Western Oregon, the state's lone NCAA Division II school, received during the 2017 fiscal year was used on scholarships, according to the athletic department. At the NCAA DII level, very few departments are fully funded in terms of being able to offer the full allotment of scholarships, and the vast majority of student-athletes only receive a partial scholarship, so these lottery funds have a substantial impact on our student-athletes, Western Oregon's Curtis Campbell said in an emailed statement. Similarly, Portland State, Oregon and Oregon State put their money solely towards scholarships they say are important in retaining student-athletes who otherwise might not get an opportunity to attend college. Both Rob Mullins at Oregon and Scott Barnes at OSU used the same word to describe the money: critical. The just over $1 million PSU received last year accounted for 7% of its overall budget, while Oregon State said its $453,000 was no drop in the bucket, even amid a budget with more than $86 million in revenue. The nearly $500,000 from the lottery helps us meet our scholarship obligations, Barnes wrote by email. It is critical given how fragile our budget is. Hope for new revenue. It goes without saying the athletic directors would welcome more money. In part, that's because their departments currently don't receive the full amount they're entitled to. The full 1% allocation of lottery revenues has been paid out one time, during the 2007-09 biennium that immediately followed the end of sports action, when schools raked in a combined $12.2 million. The legislature has distributed a capped amount below the 1% threshold ever since, and payments at times have been threatened altogether. Last spring, after sports lottery payments were left out of the governor's initial budget, Clarion athletes from Portland State and Eastern Oregon who'd received lottery-backed scholarships lobbied a subcommittee in Salem. The money was later restored, and a combined $8.2 million will be paid out this biennium. Should that payout be maintained during the 2019-21 biennium, the gap between the actual payout and the full 1% allocation would be nearly $6 million, as estimated by the Office of Economic Analysis. Asked if he sees any positives to resurrecting sports betting, OSU's Barnes replied, "Certainly a new source of revenue for the state." Robert Whalen, an economist and senior director of Econ Northwest, has tracked sports betting in Oregon for the past 15 years. He estimated the state could generate at least $50 million in net revenue if it opened a sports lottery that allowed betting on a wide range of sports, which would be a different model from the NFL-focused Sports Action Days. Matt Shelby, a public information manager for the Oregon Lottery, noted the day of the court's ruling it would still be an open question as to where any new money might go. How additional revenue would translate to money for athletics is a question that would require lengthy conversations with officials from the schools and state. After ruling, concerns follow from professional leagues to college athletics administrators. Everyone connected to athletics in the week since the Supreme Court's ruling has braced for some level of change. The NCAA last week had little choice in changing its course and announcing it will allow its championships to be held in states where sports wagering is legal, because soon, of course, every state could potentially host such betting. Delaware could be the first state to capitalize on the ruling by offering sports betting reportedly as soon as June. Oregon Lottery Public Affairs Representative Chuck Bauman displays lottery sports action entry forms and promotional material in 2005, after lawmakers introduced a bill to end the sports betting games in the state. Don Ryan, The Associated Press, 2005. But in adjusting the policy to comply with the new ruling, the NCAA made clear it remains wary of sports betting overall. Sports wagering can adversely impact student-athletes and undermine the games they play, NCAA President Mark Emmert said in a news release. We are committed to ensuring that laws and regulations promote a safe and fair environment for the nearly 500,000 students who play college athletics. In Oregon, athletic directors echoed that need for caution. The well-being of our student-athletes and the integrity of competition could be compromised, Barnes wrote. There is susceptibility to potential inducements around point shaving. Additional resources would likely need to be put in place to augment our compliance capabilities. Mullins, at Oregon, called it the top concern, but believes a highly regulated framework would contain significant education, safeguards and regulations in place to ensure that the potential for any compromise to these games is minimized. Gary Gray led the Ducks compliance department throughout the entire scope of legal sports wagering in the state, until his retirement in 2013 after nearly 3 decades. When sports action arrived, certainly we had concerns, he said. We probably tried to stress with our student-athletes that, hey, regardless if it's legal within the state, it's not legal for you, Gray said. The same way there's plenty of things within state laws that make it legal in the state but doesn't make it legal for NCAA student-athletes, but those concerns never grew into scandals. Oregon's sports lottery only involved NFL games, and Gray said he never heard of a point-shaving case in the state. I'm not naive to think that whether it's the Oregon sports lottery or not, that there probably has been people gambling on sports, Gray said. But we certainly never had anyone come to us and say, hey, I think so and so is gambling in the Oregon sports lottery. I think I would have remembered that discussion only beginning when the Big Sky Conference holds its spring meetings this week. Cleary anticipates the possibility of sports betting will be a front-burner topic for the assembled administrators. In Corvallis, Barnes had been discussing the potential effects with OSU staffers prior to the High Court's decision. Obviously, he wrote, more so since the ruling. Van Dyke was traveling last week with OIT's softball team in Atlanta for the NAIA National Championships. He didn't want to get ahead of himself. And yet, as soon as he learned of the ruling, he began considering the ways new rev might benefit the Owls in Klamath Falls. We're getting by now, but what we could do in the future would help our student-athletes, he said. If there is more of a revenue stream, we can possibly add more sports, create a better student-athlete experience and do what we're doing better. Andrew Gray, Fagerif at Oregonian.com at Andrew Brief.